Hello. I thought I'd do a quick, oops, dropped something already. A quick reaction to a couple of leaflets I've received because from the election here, I got my local candidates' propaganda. I just thought I'd have a look at just a bit of a reaction to it because I don't know who to vote for. I mean, in our constituency in northwest London, it's a bit of a problem because one of these two is bound to win. They're both rubbish, really, in my view. I don't like either of the main parties. Don't like the others much either, really. But the others get so few votes that you've got to decide, I think, tactically, who do you want in? Or don't vote at all because it's a waste of time. See, if I vote for them and they mess up the country like they usually do, then I think I'm to blame for that because I voted for them. Or maybe I'm not to blame, but really at least I can shirk responsibility if I say, well, I voted for the other lot. Anyway, just thought I'd react to some of the things they say. This is the Labour one, red. Their candidate Andrew Dismal or something like that in our constituency. First thing I notice, it says on here, the Tories have failed a generation. Well, actually, when Labour were in last, they failed a generation because they wrecked the economy good and proper. A lot of people were warning them that they were borrowing too much, that the banks were not regulated properly, and as a result of the crash, Britain was left in a terrible state. Other countries did not suffer so much. Canada, Australia, they got through it. They were not so exposed to these banksters that Labour had left us with. Labour supposedly a socialist party. In fact, nothing of the kind, really. Certainly not in those days, they weren't. And they also say staying at home or a vote for any other party means the Tories win. Scaremongering. In this constituency, they may be correct. Anyway, though. But sometimes we get Andrew Dismal in, sometimes we get Matthew Offal, or whatever his name is. So what are their policies? What are they actually talking about here? This is a house-shaped one, because housing is a big issue in London. Nobody can afford properties these days, except unless you're actually quite rich. So they're saying, stamp duty cut to zero for first-time buyers. Well, okay. It does help people to get a house, but the prices are so high that ordinary people will not notice any difference from this. They will get a huge, huge mortgage. If they get a mortgage at all, they'll be owing £200,000 or more. And since interest is charged on these mortgages, they will actually end up paying about £500,000. Now, not many ordinary people on typical wages of £25,000 a year are going to be able to afford to pay £500,000 over their lifetime, over 25 years even. So this is no help to anybody, really. It's actually a bit of help for wealthy people. And the Labour Party is supposed to be helping the poor. If you encourage first-time buyers to buy a place they can't afford, you're not helping them. You're getting them into future debt and future distress when their houses get repossessed by the banksters. And they're saying secure 3-year rents capped by inflation. That's their other policy here. Well, that's good in a sense. There's been a lot of complaints about landlords hiking the rents, but they kind of have to when the market is going up. If they get left behind, they're not making the money that they're in the business for. And they can't afford to do up their properties because the prices of all that stuff goes up as well, right? So what secure 3-year rents capped by inflation may do is reduce the number of properties available to rent, because landlords won't be able to afford it. It won't be so attractive as a business. And if you reduce the number of properties available to rent, that will push rents up. Because the rent can be capped by inflation, but if you're a new landlord, you can set it to whatever you like. But you're not capped. obviously. You just start and then you're capped. So I'm not convinced that would actually help people, help the poor people that they claim to help. So Labour has a better plan: homes to buy and action on rents. I'm not convinced, to be honest. It's and also it's gimmicky. One issue. I know they've got other policies, but this is the leaflet that I've got today. So the other one, Matthew Offal, or whatever he's called. We have a dismal choice here in this constituency. Hobson's choice, frankly. Okay, number 1, tackle crime, cut red tape, put police on our streets and make our streets safer. I think every party has been saying something like this for as long as I've been alive, and they seem to never actually do it. The Tories have been in power for 5 years. If they haven't done it by now, when are they going to do it? Okay, Labour, last time they were in, they maximised the red tape. They love bureaucracy. They think it's the solution to everything. The Tories think privatisation is the solution to everything. They're both nuts. They're both wrong, and they're both right. Some sort of mixed approach is probably right. But this sort of empty promise doesn't impress me. They've promised this before. Where is it? Fight for better services and step-free access for Thames Link and Northern Line users. Well, okay, great. It's a gimmicky, minor local issue. It affects a few people. Good for them. The other party would do the same anyway. Ensure new school places, more GP services and improve community facilities. Both parties promised to improve the education system and improve the NHS, and they both have been doing so for as long as I've been alive, and the education system is terrible. The NHS is okay. Both parties want to improve GP services and all this. There's nothing terribly unique about such a promise, and it will not be honoured anyway. The Tories in general want to give 8 AM to 8 PM access to general practitioners, doctors. So that's a party-wide policy which will make some difference. It will make doctors a bit more accessible if doctors don't resign and go to some country where life is easier. A third of doctors, I think, are thinking of quitting because they don't like these terms in which which they're working at the moment, and this party wants to make them tougher still for doctors. So it might not work. And the new school places business, I mean, immigration is so high in this country, they're having to make loads and loads of school places because this is where the jobs are in Europe at the moment. You can't blame people for wanting to come here, and this party is trying to steal some of UKIP's policies now, I notice in their manifesto, and try to limit the rate of immigration a bit, or at least limit the benefits claimants. But I don't think that was such a big problem in the first place, really. It's just the sheer numbers of people changing the culture and using up the services which they haven't paid for, and which the rest of us taxpayers can't really afford. It just needs to be slowed down a bit, that's all. I mean, as a country, we're doing very well from immigrants. We're probably making 20 billion a year profit, apparently, from them. But it's just a strain. And certain immigrant cultures do not mix very well. Middle Eastern ones, some of them, seem to cause a lot of trouble wherever they go in the world. And the parties have been kind of ignoring it up to now. They're starting to take it seriously because UKIP is making gains in the polls. Well, we'll see what happens. Nothing against those people. They can believe what they like, but they need to keep it to themselves. I don't tell them to become whatever I am, you know. Right, so what else is he saying? Committed to working with local police to fight crime and make our area safer. Well, who isn't, really? I mean, especially a politician. And why haven't they done it so far? Supports more freedoms for schools to provide a first-class education for our children. Yes, good. I kind of like free schools and stuff. I think the bureaucratic Labour system is a guarantee of a bad education. I think independent schools give you a slightly better chance of a slightly better education. It's still not very good. It's too regimented. It's too boring. This is not the way to engage kids. The whole system is designed to produce cannon fodder and factory fodder. People with no originality, people who think learning is painful, people who don't see the point of it because it actually is pointless from an educational point of view. It's simply there to keep people off the streets so their parents can go to work. It doesn't work. Neither party really wants to change that. They don't understand, I think. Passionate about our environment and fights to protect our green spaces. I haven't noticed anything. The amount of litter in certain parks and nature reserves around here is incredible, and has been for as long as I've lived in the area. No change whatsoever has happened of any real note. I think one park was given some special status and nothing changed. They got a certificate or something and that was it. Supports further tax reforms and a cap on benefits to ensure that being in work pays. Well, you see the parties kind of differ on this. The Labour Party like to give benefits to people because that is their core voter, is the benefit claimant. People who want a free handout. I mean, we all need help from the state from time to time in a modern world. Unemployment benefit or something. It can be very difficult to get a job when the Labour Party or somebody, or the Tories before them, have wrecked the economy, as they usually do after a long enough term. And the actual system itself guarantees that there will always be some unemployed people, that there will be some bankrupt people. The system actually works like that. So it's fair to help people, but it isn't fair to give people so many benefits that, for instance, a family of I don't know, people who should be working are instead producing child after child and not looking after them. Feral kids living in a massive house that I couldn't possibly afford, and yet I'm paying taxes. I'm working and paying taxes for that. I think a cap is perfectly fair. Go and get a job or something, right? But stop producing more and more children that you don't look after properly. A couple of children, fair enough, but really more than that, if you can't afford them, don't have them. Opposed to any new tax on homes which would hit local people hard. I disagree. The housing market is totally out of control, and I think capital assets of that sort should be taxed, as they are in the rest of Europe for the most part, where they haven't had a property boom, where you can get a house for 10% of the price of a house in London, outside, say, Monaco or somewhere like that. If you look around in Europe, you can get houses cheap, even in big countries like Germany and France, because they tax their properties. It stops empty properties being kept that way. Some landowners, they keep properties empty in order that they can charge more rent in their other properties. On average, they get more money out of that. Instead, a capital tax based on the value of the property will stop the properties rising out of control, or at least limit it, maybe reduce it to a bit lower than inflation, so that gradually over time the bubble deflates. It might just burst. It probably will in the end anyway. Burst again. It burst in 2008 or whenever it was, the crash. However, it didn't burst properly because prices are still going up. For it to really burst, prices should fall to 10 to 20% of what they are now. That's a proper crash. We had a warning. But they're opposed to new taxes on homes, which would hit local people hard. It would hit rich local people hard, and not very hard at that. It would hit them slightly. So I think they should be taxing homes. Not too much for the lower end of the market. Obviously, you know, ordinary people can't afford to pay too much, but there's plenty of wealthy people. There's lots of money around which they're just keeping or not investing in the community. Let's get some of that. And he's a strong supporter of a referendum on Britain's membership of the EU. So am I. The Labour Party is opposed to a referendum. I don't really understand the argument why they're opposed to it. I've heard Ed Miliband say it a few times and it doesn't sink in. I think it's disrespectful. We should have a referendum, and I think we should come out. It will be better for Britain. However, I might want to go and live in Europe at some point, and a lot of British people do go and live in Europe. So if we don't come out, we should certainly have a tough renegotiation. The treaties should be very, very different. It should not be a super state. It should be a bunch of agreements between nations. And Europe should not be interfering so much in Britain. Somewhere in this area is where I am. I don't know what the right answer is. Politicians tell you this is the right answer, that is the right answer. They don't know either. I don't agree that we would lose a lot of business if we came out of Europe. It's nonsense. We're Europe's biggest market, actually. They're not going to want to lose. We're their biggest export market, so they wouldn't want to lose that. So certainly they would come to trade agreement with us. There's no question of it. They have trade agreements with America and other countries. They would have a trade agreement with us. It's not a big deal. The common market was a good idea. It's just that wasn't the idea. That was a lie. It was a superstate, and they're still working towards it. And I think they even want to integrate Russia in the end. I mean, it's madness. Those peripheral economies are in such a bad way and so corrupt that it would be ruinous for a country like us. We would end up paying more than we get back. As we do at the moment, we already pay out twice as much as we get back because they believe in redistributing the wealth between the countries. There's some value in that, but it isn't working. It needs to be done. There needs to be a different solution. I don't know what it is though. But first, get rid of the current solution because it doesn't work. Anyway, that's my reaction to those leaflets. Your comments below, maybe. I expect I'll get some disagreement. Politics is always contentious, and I don't pretend that I've got all the answers, but I just feel that certain things are unfair, and that's what I'm saying. Okay, bye for now.